everyone. Welcome to the Global Conference of Indigenous Women. My name is Aminatu Gambo. I am from the Mbororo Fulani Indigenous Peoples of Cameroon, and I am working with FIMI as the Program Coordinator of Political Participation and Advocacy. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today two wonderful ladies who will be leading us with the spiritual opinion. First, I would like to introduce Tomomi Ganeko from the Association of Indigenous People in the Rukuyus from the Okinawa, Japan. She will be singing a song titled Flowers of the Garden Balsam, to which everyone at the conference good luck and a fruitful result. The song will mean, dye your nails with the flowers of the garden balsam. Dye your mind with the words of our parents' advice. And secondly, we will have Ms. Taraweya Tahuri, a Maori indigenous woman from New Zealand. She will be performing a karakai. It's a Maori prayer, specifically about the return journey of the Hawaii canoe to retrieve the kumara, the sweet potato, that the ancestors took, which connect the indigenous Pacific Rim nation. So it's a pleasure to give the floor to Tamoni and Taraweya.
Yes.
Tēnei te mihi atu ki a kutuahine o, o te ao taketake, ko tae mai I runga I te kaupapa o te rānei. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu mauri ora kia tātou katoa. Me karakia tātou, te karakia tīmata o te kaupapa nui nei. Hau toto, hau toto. Ko tū heke ana, ko rango heke ana, ko te ngā hau atu. Utaina taku kawa nei, he kawa tua maunga. Ka wiwini kawa wana tāra patatu ki te rangi. Au e ki, whano, wana, haramai te toki. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. E kore koe tai mai te rau takitahi me tuku ki te karere kia tai mai te wiwini kia tai mai te wawana kia tai mai te ariki korongata ki tō whenua nei e. Tēnei hoki au te kekeho atu nei kei runga awarua, awarua. E ia e te ika e takoto nei e. Anei te karakia te whiti whakamutunga. Te koho, te hua nuku, te hua tara, te hua patapata I apa. Te pererei hoai tai o matuku. Te pererei hoai tai o pani. He taputaku kiri nei te ripiripi o te rangi. Te whakarangona tu te ati tipua. Te whakarangona tu te ati tahito tina toka. Rarau te whakanui a muturangi tina toka. Te pariki Hawaii ki e. Kairaro.
Taomi, thank you so much, Taraweya. Tomi, do you want to go next?
Yes. I will be singing about Tinsagu no Hana. Okay. Tinsagu no Hana ya Chimisachi ni sumiti Uya no yushibutu ya Chimu ni sumiri muni sumiri. Okay, finish. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the spiritual ceremony and we are happy to start now with the conference. Teresa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mina, and thank you for our sisters. Muchísimas gracias a cada una de ustedes por estar en esta noche, esta mañana. Estamos emocionadísimas porque finalmente hemos llegado a la segunda conferencia global de mujeres indígenas. Ha sido un camino un poco largo porque lo teníamos planeado para el 2020. Hicimos varias reuniones en el marco de los 20 años de FIMI. Pero ustedes saben, la pandemia nos vino a cambiar muchísimos planes y finalmente hoy estamos aquí de manera virtual, asumiendo el reto de la tecnología, lo cual no es fácil, pero también es una herramienta que debemos usar. Así que muchísimas gracias a todas las hermanas que se han conectado desde distintas partes del mundo. Gracias a las hermanas que nos dieron el saludo energético. Saludamos las energías de nuestras ancestras, de quienes han caminado delante de nosotras y que han avanzado en la lucha por los derechos de las mujeres indígenas. Desde FIMI, el Foro Internacional de Mujeres Indígenas, el cual nace con ese espíritu de ser una plataforma, de ser ese espacio que facilita la coordinación, la articulación a nivel global. Eso mismo hemos hecho durante estos años, durante estas semanas. Hemos estado en coordinación con nuestras hermanas de las redes regionales en las Américas, en Asia, en África, en el Pacífico, en el Ártico, y hemos estado en movimiento alrededor de la conferencia. Pues aquí estamos, FIMI y las redes regionales, dándoles la bienvenida. Empezando nuestra segunda sesión, tuvimos en la mañana, hoy estamos acá. Y bien, sin más, quiero también dar la bienvenida a mi hermana mayor, Tarsila Rivera, y a todas las que están acá conectadas con nosotras de la directiva de FIMI y quienes nos van a acompañar y darnos su mensaje a lo largo que nos va a acompañar a lo largo de estas semanas. Así que Tarsila, muy bienvenida. Tarsila Rivera Sea es una mujer indígena, una gran lideresa de Perú. Es nuestra presidenta en FIMI y bueno, dirige también otros espacios. Muy contenta de tenerla aquí. Tarsila, le dejo la palabra. Bienvenidas a todas nuevamente. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Tere. Muy buenas noches o buenos días. Estamos con la jornada larga y con tanto entusiasmo iniciamos esta conferencia, hermanas de las diferentes regiones, pero en este caso principalmente Asia y estamos también con la hermana Lucy del África. Dirigirles unas palabras en el sentido de valorar nuestro proceso de articulación de lo local a lo global. Con las redes regionales del mundo hemos podido articularnos, pero también hacer esfuerzos por visibilizar las acciones que venimos desarrollando las mujeres indígenas desde nuestros propios contextos, ¿no es cierto? Y teniendo en cuenta las conferencias mundiales sobre la mujer y nosotras, los liderazgos femeninos que hemos venido participando en el movimiento de lucha por los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, yo creo más o menos los últimos 40 años, aunque las mujeres indígenas hemos empezado a participar en los espacios internacionales como indígenas, en las conferencias sobre la mujer promovido por las Naciones Unidas, a partir del año 1975, que fue la primera conferencia en México, y donde había una sola hermana. Luego hemos tenido la conferencia en Nairobi, donde ya éramos un poco más de 10, todas de diferentes regiones, y luego llegamos a Beijing, y Beijing es tan importante para nosotras a nivel global porque pudimos encontrarnos en una carpa a donde las mujeres del enlace continental, o sea, de las Américas, llegábamos con nuestra propuesta para ser incluida en el plan de acción de Beijing. Pero articulándonos y conversando con las hermanas de otras regiones en la Carpa de la Mujer Indígena promovida por nuestra hermana Vicky Tauli, inspiramos ese gran documento que ustedes seguramente lo conocen, que es la primera declaración de mujeres indígenas en el mundo. Desde el 95 hemos seguido participando y el Beijing +5 tiene un gran significado para lo que hoy hacemos, ¿no? Articuladamente. Nacimos en Nueva York, en Beijing +5, el 2000, en la sesión de la Comisión de Estatus de la Mujer, a donde llegamos alrededor de 100 mujeres de diversas partes del mundo y logramos una primera recomendación global como mujeres indígenas, totalmente trascendental. Luego nos fuimos preparando al Beijing +20, Cairo +20, se terminaba ya un poco los objetivos de las metas del milenio y vamos viendo nosotras los pendientes de los compromisos en esos planes de acción. Y entonces hacíamos siempre un balance, pero el balance que hacíamos por cada región tenía que de todas maneras ser compartido a nivel global. Y desde nuestro nacimiento como FIMI nos fuimos fortaleciendo en la relación con las redes regionales y logramos organizar una primera conferencia global de mujeres indígenas en el 2013, porque el 2014, teníamos la gran asamblea o la conferencia internacional sobre pueblos indígenas dentro de la Asamblea de las Naciones Unidas. Llegamos a la primera conferencia global de mujeres indígenas a partir de procesos con liderazgos claves. Y recordando, recuperamos este documento que parimos las mujeres indígenas de las 7 regiones geoculturales del mundo. Y me parece que al final de esta conferencia segunda vamos a hacer una comparación de cuánto hemos avanzado en relación a estas recomendaciones y propuesta de plan de acción y lo que deberíamos proyectar para el futuro. Lo que aquí quisiera compartir con ustedes es la importancia que tiene sumar procesos, fortalecer relaciones, articularnos y al mismo tiempo compartir sueños comunes, compartir objetivos comunes y trazar la ruta para seguir avanzando en el reconocimiento de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y de las mujeres indígenas, mirando para el futuro intergeneracionalmente, cómo vamos también tendiendo puentes con la nueva generación y los nuevos tiempos. Entonces, sumar procesos, sumar experiencias, compartir lecciones aprendidas y conocer lo que pasa en cada región con las mujeres indígenas, los avances, pero también sin dejar de mirar la agenda pendiente. Con esto yo paso la palabra, el micrófono a la hermana Lucy Mulenkey, vicepresidenta del FIMI. Y sin antes dejar de decir que las redes regionales son las dueñas y protagonistas de todo lo que hacemos articuladamente a través de este mecanismo que le llamamos el Foro Internacional de Mujeres Indígenas, que es el resultado de ese proceso, donde vamos sumando y vamos articulándonos fortalecidas. Hermana Lucy, tiene usted la palabra.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you all. Good morning from Kenya, and I think Asia also is morning, and good afternoon, the rest of the Pacific, and good evening to you, Latin America. Thank you very much, and really indeed, it's wonderful for us all to be dedicated and be able to work together. We have this conference which we have been waiting for long and have been planning, as both Teresa and Tarsila have explained, and we are very excited that it's really on now, and we feel that we are here discussing among ourselves. I would like to invite you all, government representatives who are here, UN, our different donors, participants, indigenous peoples, indigenous women and communities. We really welcome you very much, and we are very happy that you have joined us. And indeed, we are all taking this journey to continue working together, to be consistent in our work, and to look at the different activities that we've been undertaking since the first conference, since the history that Tarsila has explained. And actually, even before Beijing and even before Beijing +5, indigenous women have continued to really work hard and to make sure that they implement and they try to bring their voices on the table. And indeed, we are here today. It was great this morning to see the opening ceremony, and it's really good how we look at our cultures and see how we do our traditions and so on, how nourishing it is and how it gives us, our power to be able to continue. I would also like to really thank all the women who have been working very hard, setting up committees, trying to communicate quite before the conference and working together and putting all this in place. As Teresa has said, and Tarsila, we had our morning meeting for the rest of the other Latin America, Africa, Europe, and so on. And we also had some of our colleagues from Asia joining us, and we are really very appreciative. This is to show the dedication and the work the women, indigenous women, we have been able to undertake. It's also great at this moment that I really take the time to also thank the donors, our partners who have never given up on us, even despite the fact that this conference was planned earlier last year, but it never took place, but they still stood with us, and they still had to support us in all what we do. And also thank the great leaders that we've been having in the regions and everywhere. And I want to thank specifically the Oak Foundation, Wellspring Fund, Ford Foundation, the Christensen Fund, Foundation for Just Society, Chanel Foundation, Mama Cash, Tamalpais, and MacArthur Foundation, and any other foundation and donors that have been supporting us. You've been supporting us throughout. no matter not only to this conference, but also during our different activities that we undertake among ourselves as Indigenous women, and we really appreciate the support. Indigenous women, it's really important that the way we come together, because it gives us the strength, we share our knowledge, we share our traditional knowledge that we have, plus any other experiences that we had. And this is why we all come together to learn from each other. We have been doing quite different activities in FIMI, and I would like as much as really strongly also thank the Secretariat for being able to put things together. It's been a long journey and really dedication to be able to do that. And I thank you very much, the Secretariat, for that great work. We've been having also, just to, for those who have not been working a lot with FIMI, we've been having a lot of other activities that we've been doing. And that's why we really appreciate the work the donors give us. We have had funds that have really helped, improve and empower Indigenous women globally to be able to have a better voice and taking another journey from where they began from, like the LFS, the IANI, the Global School, and the political participation that we've been having. And this is really different activities that we've been having in training, capacity building, because this is something that has continued supporting Indigenous women to be able to move forward and to take that journey and continue. And remember, as Indigenous women, we will always try to fight hard to be heard. We still have a long way to go. Even though we have come from far, we still have that journey, but we will make it. And together, if we work together collectively, here we will, and we will always make it. Thank you very much. And I do wish you all a very wonderful meeting. I'm sure it's going to be really great, and I'm going to sit on, and I'm sure many of my colleagues also will be also listening and watching, and we hope we can all be able to enjoy the meeting. Thank you very much, and welcome again, and good luck and best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, Tarshila, and Lucy, for your warm welcome, highlighting and briefing the historical background and coordination process till we are here for Second World Conference of Indigenous Women, to translate it into reality and inviting for the political commitment. I see the excitements, hopes, and commitments there across the world, as am I one among you all. This second conference of Indigenous women is important for us and our movement to come together, shape our collective political agenda, and pave our roadmap together for collective well-being and Mother Earth. We can collaborate and act together for our movement and also for whole humankind, where our future generation can be proud of each of us for generational equality. This voice is and will be our collective voice. With great pleasure, I invite our Regional Indigenous Women's Network to convey their power message. We have our Indigenous women's representative from 7 socio-cultural regions. Let me introduce them here. We have Laura Hernandez from Mexico representing ICMA. We have Cindy Kobe from Iowa. We have Sarah Saibar from IMCAM. And we have Vicky Tauli from AWIN and Pragya Rai from NIVA. Similarly, last but not the least, we have Sandra Kramer from Nataswa. I hope I pronounce it correctly. So Laura, floor is yours. Thank you.
Gracias por darme la palabra. Buenos días, buenas tardes y en los distintos horarios en los que se encuentran todas las personas conectadas en este momento. Yo soy Laura Hernández, indígena Nahua de México. Y bueno, reciban, hermanas, de parte del Enlace Continental de Mujeres Indígenas de las Américas, EGMIA, un saludo fraterno y solidario. Ya han pasado 8 años desde la primera conferencia. Sabemos que nuestros contextos han cambiado. Hemos tenido algunos avances en nuestra participación e incidencia como jóvenes y mujeres indígenas en los espacios internacionales donde se discuten los derechos humanos, nuestros derechos. Pero se mantienen grandes obstáculos estructurales como el racismo, el colonialismo, el patriarcado, entre otros factores que se encuentran interiorizados en todos nuestros espacios, llámese las familias, las comunidades, los espacios de poder o la sociedad en general. Estos no nos permiten avanzar como quisiéramos. Y ahora se complejiza la situación por la pandemia, la cual ha profundizado las desigualdades históricas hacia nuestras comunidades y pueblos, pero se han particularizado todas las distintas formas de violencia contra las niñas, las adolescentes, las jóvenes, las mujeres y las abuelas indígenas. También la pandemia nos ha afectado para continuar nuestro trabajo comunitario y nuestro papel como defensoras indígenas. Con todo esto y las implicaciones que tenemos algunas para estar conectadas en este espacio, estamos aquí. ¿Por qué? Porque es necesario e importante encontrarnos para articularnos, para fortalecernos y para posicionar nuestras voces, participaciones y liderazgos como un movimiento sólido de mujeres indígenas dentro de la Agenda Global de Derechos Humanos y sobre todo dentro de nuestros espacios comunitarios donde vivimos día a día. Hemos demostrado que nuestras distancias geográficas y de idiomas no son una barrera. Lo que nos une es la búsqueda del bienestar de nuestras vidas y de nuestros pueblos. Sigamos, hermanas, sembrando la organización, la lucha colectiva de distintas generaciones de mujeres indígenas. Que de la segunda conferencia global surjan posicionamientos y mensajes claros y poderosos que demuestren que las mujeres indígenas del mundo estamos unidas y enlazadas como un tejido bordado desde nuestras ancestras y que es difícil de romper, que desde nuestros distintos horizontes estamos juntas caminando e incidiendo a nivel global. Que todo el proceso de la segunda conferencia global salgan frutos y semillas para todas las mujeres indígenas y para las futuras generaciones. Por último, agradecemos todo el esfuerzo colectivo del FIMI y las redes regionales para impulsar la segunda conferencia global. Les deseamos los mayores de los éxitos y mucha luz para todas en sus caminos y en este proceso. Muchas gracias.
Sorry. With this, may I invite Cindy for her speech, please?
Dear Indigenous sisters, greetings. I'd like to welcome you all to the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women. My name is Cindy Kobe from the Ogek Indigenous Community, and I'm speaking to you today from Nairobi, Kenya. I am representing the African Indigenous Women Organization, a regional network composed of Indigenous women leaders representing local and community-based organizations from all over the region. The network comprises of African Indigenous women and girls representing the various subregions in Africa, like the French West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, Sudan, and other Arab-speaking countries in Northern Africa. We work towards the promotion of Indigenous women and girls' rights and Indigenous rights throughout Africa. For the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women, IWO is delighted to be part of this meeting today. It comes 3 days after celebrating World Indigenous Peoples Day with the theme Leaving No One Behind, Indigenous Peoples and the call for a new social contract, a very important day for Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women. The conference is an opportunity for Indigenous women from Africa and beyond to meet, reconnect, and inspire each other to strengthen the articulation between the other Indigenous organizations worldwide. IWO and its members, partners with the support of FIMI, have greatly progressed in advocating for their rights. They have been able to do this through capacity building by participating in different national, regional, and international meetings like the Commission on Status of Women, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the Generation Equality Forum, the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and the Convention on Biological Diversity, amongst other forums at the regional, national, and local level. Since the first World Indigenous Women's Conference, great progress has and continues to be made. Africa Indigenous organizations have built their capacity in different ways through trainings, workshops, and other activities. They have also managed to access funding from Leading from the South and Tiny Fund, Foundation for a Just Society, amongst others, which has made them visible. Our African Indigenous women are now able to grow and be recognized on international platforms. During the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women, it is with great pleasure that Africa hosted 3 interactive sessions during the morning session. And we also came up with a declaration for this conference, which will present their priorities and recommendations and add the African Indigenous woman's voice to the global statement. African Indigenous women are happy because we are able to join other sisters in bringing our united voice towards advocating for the rights of Indigenous women, and we recognize that we still have a long way to go before our rights are fully respected and recognized, so let us continue working together. Let us not look at completion, let's reach at the rural Indigenous women who need us more than ever. Let us build partnerships among ourselves and with each other, for this is the only way we can progress. I wish you all fruitful deliberations during the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. So with this, I would like to invite Sarah. Sarah, over to you.
Hi. Y saludos, hermanas. Hirutu Bashkina Tatawa. Les saludo en mi idioma materno, que es el idioma Cabécar. Soy Sara Mayorga, Sara Síbar, Cabécar de Costa Rica y coordinadora de la Alianza de Mujeres Indígenas de Centroamérica y México. Desde los 4 puntos cardinales del mundo y con el espíritu colectivo de todas las mujeres indígenas de la región centroamericana y de México, recibimos con armonía el inicio de la segunda Conferencia Global de Mujeres Indígenas, el cual será un espacio para escucharnos y proponer acciones y elementos que han vulnerado los derechos específicos y colectivos de los pueblos. Desde hace muchos años hemos venido construyendo procesos desde lo local, realizando planteamientos desde nuestras realidades. Sin embargo, a la fecha, los estados no han priorizado dentro de las agendas nacionales nuestros derechos. Actualmente nos enfrentamos a un contexto adverso con lo de la pandemia, que ha venido a debilitar las luchas colectivas por estas medidas de distanciamientos, pero a pesar de todo ello estamos acá presentes para alzar la voz y fortalecer las redes de mujeres indígenas, que nos permita este espacio articular e incidir en las políticas públicas, pero principalmente nos va a servir para oxigenar nuestros movimientos, tanto de pueblos indígenas en general como movimientos de mujeres. Además, esperamos que este espacio nos permita construir una agenda global, el cual vamos a exigir a niveles de países para que generen impactos positivos tanto en lo económico, político, social y lingüístico en la vida de los pueblos, mujeres, juventudes, niñez indígena. La pandemia nos ha distanciado físicamente, pero nos ha hecho más fuerte espiritualmente. Reconocemos y respaldamos el rol estratégico del Foro Internacional de Mujeres Indígenas, FIMI, para acompañar la lucha de las mujeres y por ser creativa, por motivar estos espacios de participación en donde nos permite articular esfuerzo y compartir, tener este espacio virtual de convivio donde vamos a fortalecernos desde todos nuestros ámbitos, tanto organizativos como a nivel personal. Es muy importante aprovechar este espacio para reflexionar en cada una de las mujeres desde nuestras ancestras a las que estamos y a las que vendrán, a todas las que han tejido y a las que actualmente tenemos estos hilos que estamos tejiendo y qué vamos a pasar a nuestras futuras generaciones. Reunimos todas esas energías para desear desde la Alianza de Mujeres Indígenas mucha luz y energía para el éxito de esta conferencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Sarah, for your powerful message. With this, I would like to invite Victoria Tauli for her speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to FEMI for organizing this event, which is the second International Women's Conference organized by FEMI. I would like to just make some historical corrections. You know, it's true that this is the second International Women's Conference organized by FEMI, but we should not forget that the first International Women's Conference was held in Adelaide, Australia in 1989, and this was organized by the Aboriginal Women's Working Party, led by Jo Wilmot and Jackie Huggins. So, and then there was another conference that was held in Karasjok in Norway in 1990. This was organized by the Sami Women's Forum. No, so I just like to say that so that we will not forget that there were initial efforts that were done before FEMI was organized and before we had these world conferences, because it's also a way of giving credit to those women who have initiated the work. If you look at the Google, you will find all the reports on these two conferences. So we are building upon all the efforts that have happened in the past, no? And after the 1992 conference in Sami, where we discussed the Fourth World Conference on Women, which was going to be held in Beijing, no? And in Beijing, the Asia Indigenous Women's Network, which was organized in 1993, we organized the Indigenous Women's Tent, no? And that was where we met a lot of the other women coming from all parts of the world. I think Tarsila was there. I remember Mililani Trask, as well as Winona LaDuke. No, we were all there. And then we made the Beijing Indigenous Women's Declaration. And of course, lobbied hard at the Beijing conference to ensure that references to Indigenous women are put into the final declaration and program of action. No, so this is just to recall with you the historical development of how Indigenous women have come together and strengthened each other. You know, what was said earlier by our colleagues in terms of the use of these kinds of conferences, in terms of sharing the experiences, sharing the lessons that we have learned along the way, and of course, moving towards even a higher, stronger empowerment of Indigenous women all over the world. I think that's what we have been doing since we have been established. The AIWN, the Asia Indigenous Women's Network, is like a network of federations or organizations of women in 11 countries, no, in Asia. And as I said, we did play an active role in all these processes. And now we are here having this international conference. And I think that this international conference will be a way of celebrating again our successes, as well as learning lessons from the work that we have been doing with our women since the 1980s. No, I would like to just emphasize that I think that the visibility of Indigenous women globally has increased considerably because of all the work the cumulative work that we have all done. And FEMI definitely has played a very important role. No, FEMI has come up with some reports, with very important reports that were used, no, in lobbying for our rights in not just in the Commission on the Status of Women, but also with the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. AIWN has been contributing to the inputs, has been giving inputs to these various processes. And the last one was the conference that was held, the seminar that was held with the CEDAW committee chair. We are now in the process of getting the CEDAW to adopt a general recommendation on Indigenous women and or a general comment. And we think that if we manage to get that, then we can use the CEDAW even more effectively to send our complaints or our grievances for them to address these issues. As was mentioned earlier, the context is very different now, especially with COVID. Yesterday, we were just having a discussion about the extent of domestic violence, which has increased considerably after COVID, with people being in lockdown. Reports of increased domestic violence have been coming forth. And I think this is one big issue that we still continue to address. The whole issue of violence against Indigenous women remains an issue in conflict areas. Rapes and all kinds of violence have been happening. And so we need to expose this more widely and use these situations to influence the decisions that are coming out of the relevant bodies. I would like to again congratulate FEME and all the other networks of Indigenous women all over the world for putting efforts in strengthening and helping strengthen and empower Indigenous women. And I do see that we have a very bright future ahead of us, despite the situation that we face. And hopefully we will be able to really come up with a more comprehensive report on the impact of COVID on Indigenous women all over the world. I think the burden that Indigenous women have to bear to be caregivers for COVID victims, as well as being victims themselves, is so tremendous that more action has to be undertaken and more support should be given by the international community. I wish you all the best in the event, and we will be we will be participating in all the events that you are organizing. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all.
Thank you, Victoria Tauli, for very powerful message. So with this, I will invite Pragya for her message, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Susilaji. Sewa, Sewaro, and good morning. I'm Pragya Rai from Rai Indigenous Community in Nepal. On behalf of Network of Indigenous Women in Asia, NIWA, I extend my warm greetings to all the Indigenous sisters and brothers around the world. NIWA is a network of Indigenous women's organizations and networks covering 14 Asian countries across East Asia, Southeast Asia, Mekong, and South Asian subregions. Firstly, I should sincerely thank FEME for taking up this huge initiative to bring all Indigenous women together with the goal of making the world a better place for all of us. During this time, it is important for us to draw lessons from the issues around us. It is pertinent to take note of the increasing violence against Indigenous women in Asia, trumped up charges against the Indigenous women's rights defenders, and increasing land grabbing issues exacerbated with the cover-up of COVID-19. The shrinking space for us Indigenous women has made it even challenging to voice our struggles and difficulties. We are convinced that this conference of 4 days have created our platform to amplify our voices and claim our rightful spaces. We hope to discuss these issues, learn, share our experience in this safe space initiated by FEME. Thank you in solidarity and in sisterhood from Network of Indigenous Women in Asia, NIWA. Thank you all.
Thank you, Pragyaji. With this, I would like to invite Sandra. Over to you.
Greetings, sisters. Thank you all. First of all, warm greetings. First of all, to you all, and I'd like to acknowledge the land we are on today, and also to my elders, past and present. And I'd also like to acknowledge all of the lands and territories that you are on today. I'd like to acknowledge my Indigenous sisters for sharing their knowledge and strength with me in my journey of my life, and especially thanks to FEMI for putting this World Conference on for Indigenous women today and keeping us united and as a collective voice. I think this is very important. And I think also I'd like to thank the women in the Pacific, especially from the women who are in Guam, who have helped coordinate this and have helped coordinate our Women's Conference for the Pacific. I'm speaking to you all from Australia. In the Pacific, we have thousands of islands throughout the Central and South Pacific Oceans, which include Australia. And the other two, we also have large land masses, New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. Though we have many different languages and most of the islands in the Pacific are Indigenous people. As women, we are the ones who are making challenges, and to do this together as a collective, it is important. For we need to stay connected during this difficult time. We may not be able to meet face to face, but we are here with each other. So we will continue to be visible and not invisible. This will keep us at the table for our issues and for our voices, knowledge, and make changes for us. And for us to make the wrongs right, and for us to make the changes. Indigenous women are making a stand, uniting collectively to challenge that system of laws and policies, to become self-reliant and for our self-determination. As Indigenous women, we know we have a high rate of domestic violence. There are social issues and gaps. We also have high rate of removal of children in some of our Indigenous communities. We all have poor housing. There are high rates of incarceration and there are also high rates, and we must forget the high rates of suicide. We have mental health issues and we have unemployment. For us, we know these social harms have been lingering with us for Indigenous people for so long that for some of our people, they are now seeming to be normal, and they are now, sadly, becoming permanent for Indigenous people. This is why we must use and understand the human rights mechanisms which are specifically designed to solve these hard to solve social harms through a human framework. The scale and severity of the violence faced by Indigenous women, as we know, require a coordinated and comprehensive national response, which is now being addressed. And this is one of the ways that FEMI are doing, is addressing the violence that we face as Indigenous women. Through this, they are injecting the human rights principles, and it shows the support and shows the responsibility that we are doing to protect women and children and to make them safe. We know that the human rights strategies are not a magic bullet for solving the complex dilemmas that posed by domestic violence. But hopefully it can offer an additional tools for us and for the knowledge of Indigenous women. At the very least, it is important that we hope we may continue the conversation about the relevance of the international human rights laws and rights to our everyday domestic violence advocacy work that we do as Indigenous women around the world. It is though through our resilience that is Indigenous women's and peoples and our reconnecting with elders and our traditional knowledge that we are also doing this during COVID. And this is really important to continue to pass our traditional knowledge and our understanding of who we are and our languages to our children. We know that during this time of COVID, there is a high rate of domestic violence, but we also must not forget the climate change, water issues, food security, and our economic issues. But as Indigenous women, we are still here standing. We are among the high rate of sole traders in business, And we are business owners because we sell our goods, our jewelry, our food, and we make our foods. We're all sole traders. That is an Indigenous woman doing business. And for us, that is a way of moving ahead. We are creating our own economy. We are creating employment, and we are making funds and economic funds available for ourselves, our families, and our communities. We may not see each other on an everyday like we used to. We may not have our meetings together. But one thing that we are doing is that we are not forgetting our sisters who are in isolated areas. We are all here being a voice, and we are all being a voice collective. We do not forget each other. We do not forget each other, our issues. And we, as Indigenous women, this is why this conference and this World Conference that FEMI is putting on today over the next couple of days is our collective voices as Indigenous women. We have not forgotten each other. These conferences by FEMI is a time of learning, is a time of sharing, and is a time of learning our lessons and to know the issues that we are facing in each of our regions. We will learn together, and we will also find solutions together. And we will find those solutions that are creating those issues in our communities. I thank you all, and I thank FEMI again for this conference. I thank our funders. I thank the FEMI staff, the board of directors, and all of those who have coordinated conferences in their regions. And thank you all to our participants especially, for it is you that we are here. And I hope that you will all continue to stay on each of the conferences and hear and be supportive of each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra, for your powerful message. Today, we miss Gudrun Eriksson from SNF, but we send our warm regards to her and all the community in her region. With this, thank you all of our Regional Indigenous Women's Network representative for sharing the achievements, the challenges, and aspiring whole Indigenous women, our network, and our supporter and allies with your voices, experiences, lesson learned, and commitments, and also for calling for the action to the collectivism and empowerment to make the world a better place to live in. Our journey was not easy, but we persisted, and we will so in the future. We are together stronger more than ever for our collective journey and also navigating the difficult times like COVID and also like impact of climate change. Hence, it is a very time to reflect our roles, our movement in transforming our realities and implementing our rights. So now, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Chanda Thapa to moderate this next session. She will be moderating what role do we as Indigenous women and as a movement take on in transforming our reality and implementing our rights. Floor is yours, Chandaji.
Thank you so much, Sushilaji. Jorle, good morning and good evening to all my sisters, brothers, representatives from the government agencies, civil society organizations, UN agencies, and our close allies from all over the world. I'm Chanda Thapa Mogar from Nepal, and I'm moderating this session. So a very warm welcome to everyone in the opening plenary, which titles Current Panorama and How We as Indigenous Women Transform Realities. This is the first day of our session for the Asia and the Pacific of the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women. So we have already heard very powerful messages from our Indigenous sisters from different regions. So once again, I wish you all very happy International Day of World's Indigenous Peoples. And with that, I also express my immense pleasure and gratitude to FEMI team for the opportunity to be a part of this historic moment. So today in this session, we are joined by our very powerful Indigenous women leaders from 3 regions to share about their struggles and struggles as Indigenous women and how they are transforming their struggles into realities. In this session, we will also be exploring and discussing on how to attain a global outlook on the struggle for protecting and promoting the individual and collective rights of Indigenous women from the perspective and experiences of Indigenous women leaders across the region. So yeah, we all are very excited for this session to hear from our sisters. So each panelist will get 5 minutes after the first question to respond the first question. So firstly, let me start with Honorable Nanaia Mahuta. She is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of New Zealand. I'll just share a brief bio of her. During her time in the parliament, Nanaia supported policies and initiatives that build the capacity of communities, especially social service organizations, greater investment in education, employment, and training opportunities, particularly for young people, supported the continuation of treaty settlement process, and supported specific initiatives that lift the well-being and opportunities for young moms, those who are vulnerable and victims of abuse. So Nanaia is a tribal member of Waikato Tainui, Ngati Maniapoto, and Ngati Manu, and her parliamentary experience has enabled her to contribute to the collective aspirations of Maori and all the all New Zealanders. In the 2020 Labour government, Nanaia became the first woman to hold the foreign affairs portfolio. She is also the Minister of Local Government and Associate Minister for the Maori development. So with the introduction itself, we can already imagine like how powerful and successful leader our Honorable Nanaia is. I would just like to ask you, it can be sometimes very challenging, but at the same time, we all agree that building and working with the alliances are very, very important. It's much more needed at our context, especially in the context of Indigenous peoples where we believe in collectivism. So in order to transform the realities. So as an Indigenous leader, as a political leader, so where you now hold a very powerful position also where you can transform your vision into the reality and bring positive changes to your own communities, people of your own communities. So maybe if you could share with us, like what has been your experiences in establishing a collaboration for the collective dreams for the communities that you represent. Over to you, Honorable Nanaia.
Tuatahiti nei mihi atu kia koutou katoa. I tāpiri atu ki tēnei o ngā taumata kia aro atu.
We can't hear you. Can others hear or it's only me?
Can you hear me?
Is there any problem in the audio? Maybe from the FEMI technical team?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Tuatahi e mihi atu kia tata katoa e kuihui mai nei, e tāpiri atu ki tēnei o ngā taumata.
I think still it's not audible.
We can hear her, but we cannot hear the interpretation.
Ah, okay. I can't hear in any of none of the.
Do you want me to speak?
Okay, so which one do we use? English? I can't hear any
We can hear Chanda. Maybe it's from your part. I was able to hear her speaking.
E mihi kawana kia tata katoa, e hui hui mai nei. Hei tāpiri atu ki tēnei o ngā kaupapa, e pāna ki a tātou nei wahine. Just a brief greeting in my own language to acknowledge everybody who has joined this platform to be able to share some views around the advancement of aspirations of Indigenous women and the way in which we can transform realities. The question was asked of me, what has been my experience in establishing collaborations for collective dreams? And can I say that during my time as an Indigenous woman in Parliament, much of what I do requires strong collaborations and strong relationships across various communities in order to advance the interests of women. So I thought that I could share some thoughts in relation to the way in which Māori women have contributed to the advancement of Indigenous issues within our own country. In fact, Māori women are core to the role of transformation in that we are nurturers, mothers. Whānau are often at the forefront of our minds, the role of family. Whenua is an important connector to the way in which we develop our aspiration, and whenua is our connection to our traditional lands, and the way in which we ensure that by nurturing all those relevant alliances and relationships, we have a very strong focus on hapori or community. And very much underpinning a lot of that perspective is that in many of our societies, I suspect, which is true of Māori women in New Zealand society, our role as nurturers of whānau, our family, our connecting role to our communities, our hapori, and to the whenua, our land, we are also good kaitiaki or stewards and custodians of the natural environment. You will see in our country context that the role of Māori women also is quite relevant when it comes to entrepreneurship and small business. Māori women make a strong contribution and many research reports have evidenced the fact that we are the fastest growing entrepreneurial population within our own country. So again, this links to some of the statements that have already been raised. But what we're trying to do here in Aotearoa New Zealand is use our context to promote other Indigenous opportunities. So we are very much ensuring that Indigenous collaborations lead to economic, social and cultural opportunities through collaboration. We've reached our first Indigenous collaboration agreement with Australia, who in our region is our closest neighbour. And by doing so, we want to ensure that we can build out the unique opportunities that Indigenous peoples can provide to one another through collaboration. And when I think about collaboration that is mandated by Indigenous peoples, that has many different forms beyond just economics. It is about our culture, our language, our ability to draw strength from each other's experience to be able to aid social advancement. We're also using our role and presence within Parliament and government to be able to ensure that the aspirations of Indigenous peoples are a topic during our host year of APEC 2021. And while we're undertaking much of our diplomacy and our forum on virtual platforms, we know that by introducing the Indigenous perspective into APEC, that too will bring an opportunity for potential transformation about the way in which building back better in a COVID environment can ensure inclusive economic recovery if Indigenous peoples are central to that aspiration. Lastly, can I comment on the role that we're taking to ensure a festival of Indigenous and tribal ideas can be a part of the Dubai 2020 World Expo, which is being held later this year. It was delayed due to COVID, but one of the opportunities we have seen is to host a 3-day event, Te Aratini, in order to bring together those Indigenous connections so that we can promote the benefits of trade, economic opportunity, underpinning social advancement through those various fora. Lastly, can I return home to Aotearoa New Zealand and our country context? We have a strong Indigenous women's civil society grouping of organisations who are challenging the way in which systemic inequality and inequity have occurred through various laws and policies that have caused prejudice and harm to Māori women. That advocacy has led to a number of actions being taken, and I hope that through our participation in this forum today and our ongoing collaboration with other Indigenous women around the world where we can share our experiences, we can learn from one another. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Nanaya. I think that's something very important for others while we are gathering like Indigenous women groups and networks, organizations from all around the world to really see how we can also learn from the Maori Indigenous women's movement in that context. So maybe if you could just share a little bit more on what kind of role do these Indigenous women's organizations take in terms of like transforming our realities or transforming, implementing our rights in a real sense? I know there are like a lot of struggles, but at the same time, like what is your own experience on that area? Yeah.
So our experience with Indigenous civil society groups has been one where the leadership for the way in which systemic social inequalities have occurred have often sought solutions from these groups who in the past have been involved in delivering health and social service initiatives to strengthen women and their role within the family. And that over time has evolved into the way in which they are supporting Māori women into business. Entrepreneurship is a very strong theme around transformation because, as was mentioned previously by the Australian delegate, the way in which Indigenous women participate in entrepreneurial activity lifts opportunities within a household and across a community, and it is more likely to have a long-term impact in the lifetime outcomes of children and families going forward into the future. And then there is the inequity of the way in which Māori women's participation within the labour market needs to be addressed. And in a COVID context, what we have found is that the advocacy across the health professions of Māori women identifying and shining a light on that level of inequity has brought to the attention these levels of disparity by which the government is seeking to now elevate their attention to and try and address. The other area I would say that Māori women are making a strong contribution towards is in education, skills and training. Very much the empowerment of the Māori population and families through education has been an avenue where you will see Māori women participating very strongly to ensure that education is a tool for transformation as well.
Thank you so much for that sharing. Of course, I think two very important points that you have mentioned. One is as Maori communities, like Indigenous women groups in your own community, you are building, you're calibrating with Indigenous peoples, even with the government and civil society, and trying to like center around the social, cultural, traditional aspects also, so that also kept as a center of priority for our work. And another very important part is, I think, building the capacity of Indigenous women through education, and then engaging them in the entrepreneurship activities for building their economic empowerment as a whole also. I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll come back to you later, maybe at the end of the session. So maybe we are supposed to be joined by our sister from Sami Parliament, but unfortunately she could not join now. But she has sent a message through a recorded video. So I'll just briefly share her introduction. Christina Henriksson, she's the president of Sami Council. She represents the Norwegian Sami Association and has been in the leadership of Sami organizations for last 20 years. So she has held positions in various other organizations, board and committees as well. So she will be briefly sharing about what kind of progress has been achieved in fulfilling the rights of Indigenous Sami women from the Indigenous governance system. So yeah, maybe we can just play the video.
Excellencies, friends, congratulations with implementing the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women. I am addressing you from Ariel Sápmi, the southern part of Sápmi, where the Sami movement held its first national meeting over 100 years ago. The colonialization of the land and of our people threatened the livelihoods, the culture, and the language of the Sami people. Sami women and men organized to voice the needs and demands of the people and to seek solutions. Luckily, the movement did not stop with the gatherings and meetings in Trente, Stare, and Dietno 100 years ago. The movement grew and is still growing, and on this occasion I would like to highlight the efforts and the work of the Sami Women's Forum, bringing together female Sami leaders from all parts of Sápmi towards a strong and healthy Sami future. But where do we find ourselves today, 100 years after the first organizing gatherings? When the Sami parliaments were established, male representatives dominated the assemblies. However, things changed in the 2000s, and for a minute there, it seemed the situation was turned upside down. Sami women ran for election and were elected. The Sami parliaments in Norway and Finland have had female presidents, and the power women in the Russian side are still going strong. I am myself honored to follow in the footsteps of multiple female presidents of the Sami Council. But certainly, the Sami community have our share of patriarchy and misogyny, even though the females among our people have defeated internal and external threats and kept communities together through centuries. Recent research from the University of Tromsø tells us that Sami women are more exposed to domestic violence than women from the majority population. And the survey also shows that experience with violence in the childhood increases the risk of becoming a victim of domestic violence. Female leadership cannot come at the expense of women's safety, and as we now have these findings, I'm impatient to learn why this is so and how we can end it. Why are Sami women and other indigenous women overrepresented in these and in similar statistics? I am convinced that some of the explanation is rooted in history and the efforts by the states to eliminate our cultures and languages, and I do hope that the ongoing processes with truth commissions can provide answers. Reconciliation is supposed to succeed the truth in these processes, but that road is even more challenging to stay on than the one seeking the truth. I can only hope that these processes will be positive for our peoples and our communities. And I will end by saying that Sápmi, yet divided by nation-state borders and language barriers, is moving forward, with leaders of different genders creating safe and healthy spaces and environments for the diversity of our people. We need all good forces, and I thank you for giving me the floor in this important conference. Ologito, thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for her powerful message. Of course, I think the situation is almost quite similar to what is happening in Africa or in Asia or Latin America. So even though they have a century-long history of their movement where they are fighting for their identity, but at the same time, they are also facing like different layers of violence, whether you talk about domestic violence or political violence. But despite these challenging situations, so Sami women are quite exemplary. I think the commendable work that they are doing, leading the movement at the same time, they are like breaking the barriers and taking the lead in the political arena. Like she mentioned about the representation of Sami women as as a president, female president, itself is quite way ahead of what as an outcome of their movement for sure. So, but at the same time, I think we have achieved some in due process, but at the same time, the challenges are still there, especially the matter related to reconciliation has always been a challenging process, like across the globe. So it's the same as you mentioned about the reconciliation process is more challenging for them. So hopefully there will be some point where people feel that they are more into a space or into a living living a life in more dignified and then justful life. So once again, thank you to Christina for taking time to share her experience. So we have one more, two more actually, but we, I think another speaker is not has not joined yet. So I'd like to request Pratima Guru, another speaker. So I think many of you already know her. She's an activist for the rights of indigenous peoples and women with disabilities in Nepal and Asia. And she's also a member of the steering committee of the Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network. So talking about intersectionality, the discussion has been started in the recent years, Pratimaji, but most of the time either it's very superficial or like it's taken as like indigenous, the issue of intersectionality is taken as just for token, like for the representation, but not having a meaningful, effective representation of women with disability, particularly indigenous women with disability. So that's a challenge that we don't talk about intersectionality within the indigenous women group, like forget about the mainstream group. So as you being a leader, like taking lead even at the national, regional, and global level, advocating for the meaningful and effective representation, participation of indigenous women with disability. So in this process, like what specific challenges you have faced just because your identity as indigenous women with disability? And then how do you see that we can achieve an inclusive world by breaking down those paradigms? Pratimaji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chandaji. Indigenous greetings, Chajalo in my native language to our Mother Earth, ancestors, elders, indigenous brothers and sisters. I'm Pratima Gurung and I'm representing Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network and my organization, National Indigenous Disabled Women Association of Nepal. I would like to also greet Indigenous wishes to all my brothers and sisters on behalf of the World Indigenous Peoples Day. and to all the other non-Indigenous communities also. And I'm very much honored to speak in this historic event as an Indigenous woman representing myself from Asia and my country, Nepal. So I would say that we Indigenous women with disabilities comprise of 28 million all around the globe. And if you look at the 28 million Indigenous women with disabilities, 80% of them comprise or reside from the Asia and the Pacific region. And that is why we are advocating, amplifying our voices from the global South. And the narratives are being framed in that way. So for me, I would say that when it comes to Indigenous women, we know that the Indigenous women have played a paramount importance for the preservation of the sovereignty over our land, territories, natural resources, and we have contributed to maintaining our world. But when it comes to Indigenous women with disabilities, we know that racism, sexism, ableism, historical, systematic, and structural discrimination, including patriarchy, obstructs the participation of women with disabilities in the very political sphere, including the private and the public sphere. When it comes to Indigenous women with disabilities, the identities are further exacerbated in the forms of multiple discriminations that we face at the grassroots level and in our daily lives. Our multiple identities intersects, overlaps, and which further marginalized us in the overall social spectrum, and most often we are invisible and unheard. And in this regard, I would like to recall that women with disabilities and their issues in the earlier World Conference were not visible. And this year is very much historic for us to celebrate our pains and sufferings, and also to express our collective solidarity that we Indigenous brothers and sisters, including all Indigenous sisters from all around the globe, are having a collective momentum to share and to celebrate the diversity that we have. So being an Indigenous woman and challenging for the rights within our communities, within the overall Indigenous peoples movement, and within the disability and the overall women movement, one of the challenges that we have often faced is related with our multiple identities and our disability identities. The disability inclusion and the disability accessibility is our core fundamental challenges that we have been facing as a women with disabilities within the Indigenous movement and spectrum. So in this regard, I would say that Indigenous women with disabilities have their own issues, like the issue of participation, the issue of being in the room to express our challenges, to tell our realities that we face in our daily lives when we try to receive services, basic services like right to health, education, right to opportunities, livelihood, and right to dignified life. These are the very fundamental things that we face challenges as a women with disabilities within our communities. So our challenge as an Indigenous women with disabilities are our struggles are within our private sphere. But at the same time, I would also like to highlight that those challenges are at the public sphere and within our Indigenous people's movement and beyond. So in this regard, we have been able to gather from the 7 geopolitical regions by comprising the global network, where we are able to ensure and advocate our rights of Indigenous people with disabilities from the global arena, because our struggles at the national level was very much difficult, because to bring the synergy of the 3 important international instruments: the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UN Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the Convention on the Rights of Elimination of Discrimination of all forms of discrimination against women, which is called CEDAW. So to bring the collective voices and to bring a common platform within this international instrument is still a challenge at the global level. But it doesn't mean that we have lost our hopes. We have done our achievement at the global level, trying to bring the UN mandate holder like the UN Special Rapporteur on the Indigenous People, the UN Special Rapporteur on Person with Disabilities, and other special rapporteurs have come together in a common platform, sitting together on the table to discuss that how these multiple and intersecting identities and groups can come together, and how can we collectively ensure the rights and voices of these groups who are having multiple identities. And in this regard, I would like to thank Ms. Vic Dowley Corpus, who has really been instrumental for making these initiatives. And this initiatives has been a collective effort by all our indigenous sisters who are here in this global conference attending and supporting us. And this has really made us to have a collective strength, to have a collective voice, to have a collective power, to amplify and to also situate our position that what we demand is an indigenous women with disabilities. Today, we would like to amplify and we would like to make our voice that today we want to be recognized not as a woman, not as indigenous women, but we want to be recognized as a indigenous women with disabilities, because we have a distinct identity which is different from an indigenous woman and which is different from the other women. So in that regard, I would say that the issue of intersectionality, the lens of intersectionality, and bringing the lens of indigeneity from a gender lens is very much crucial. And I would like to also highlight and reiterate in this Second World Conference that we need to look reaching the farthest behind. If we look at the World Indigenous Peoples slogan this year, this clearly outlines about leaving no one behind. So if we want to amplify our voices in a human right base and to reach the most marginalized groups, I think a collaboration, a synergy of all these international instruments and all these voices from the ground has to come together to make a collective voices. And in this regard, I would say that we are amplifying our voices from the ground, and we would like to have a collective solidarity from at the national level, at the regional level, and the global level from all our indigenous brothers, sisters, our government, development partners, and all the peoples who are supporting us indirectly in this movement to amplify our voices, to bring a just and a human right approach for all people, including women with disabilities, leaving no one behind, and also respecting the slogan of nothing about us without us.
Thank you, Pratima ji. Sorry. Thank you, Pratima ji, for your sharing. Of course, we sometimes like box ourselves in one category as women or just indigenous women. So when we talk about that, when we talk about women and indigenous women, sometimes, not sometimes, I think most of the time we forget about the intersectional groups within the indigenous groups as well. So I think you mentioned about different challenges. Of course, I think there is quite systemic and systematic, challenges that indigenous women with disability have been facing. So that's the reason, as you have emphasized, like we need to focus on those who are at like lagging behind, or like the whole slogan of no one leaving behind should be actually implemented in action, not only just in the slogan. So I think that's quite important. But I think you also have been working with different mandate holders. You have their very specific CRPD international mechanism as well. So maybe like we have discussed a lot about the challenges and problems, but I think in due process, you mentioned about like for example, our former mandate holder, Vicky's support is how crucial it can be at this junction where different kind of mechanisms have to come together to support and then advocate for the issues to be, like mainstreaming indigenous women with disabilities issues. So If you look at like in the last 10 years or after the adoption of CRPD, so what are the achievements in terms of your own movement you see like more visible? I know like it's we can't have more, but at least I think that would also be good to know, like, okay, at least your movement, indigenous peoples with disabilities movement, indigenous women with disabilities movement has come this far, and that can be more inspiring for others to like take it forward from where you have started. Yeah, Pratima ji, would you like to share a little bit more?
Thank you, Chandaji. So I would just like to give a very concrete example of the UNCRPD. So it has been a long journey since 2014. If you look at the recommendations, the concluding observations provided to different member states within the UNCRPD committee, we have seen that there are near about 26 member states who have already have a concrete recommendations on indigenous people with disabilities and indigenous women with disabilities. And in that regard, I would like to say the issue of intersectionality, the issue of multiple discrimination, the issue of meaningful participation, inclusive education. What does inclusive education mean for children with disabilities and indigenous children with disabilities has been clearly outlined. This is what I would say the first concrete achievements that we have so far made. The second concrete achievements that we have made within the CRPD committee is we have been able to amplify our voices as indigenous people with disabilities, having our own unique particular SADO report that frames the guidelines of the collective and individual rights. So we are telling this UNCRPD committee, if you look at the Article 19 of the UNCRPD, living independently in a community. So what does living independently mean for a person with disabilities? And what does it mean for a indigenous people? So that has been clearly outlined, and that has been clearly suggested to the UNCRPD committee at the global level. And this has really brought the achievements at the grassroots level. For example, if you look at Nepal, we are right now having conversations, dialogues, formal and informal meetings with our governments for ensuring and implementing the concluding observation of the CEDAW, the CRPD, and also the other international instruments like the UN DRIP and the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples Outcome Document. So we are trying to link these international instruments with the Sustainable Development Goals, telling that how do we ensure leaving no one behind and reaching the farthest for. And in that regard, we are also amplifying and advocating our rights and voices for disaggregated data, because we require data not only from a sex, not only from ethnicity, but also from a disability identity. So that is how we are amplifying our voices at the grassroots level and also at the global level. But I would say that this journey has just started. It is really a very challenging journey, and it is really very difficult to internalize, to realize what human right-based approach mean and what we do in the practice and what we do or what is in the policy. There is a huge gap within ourselves. So I would say that it is time for us. The Second World Conference is a space for us to rethink ourselves, within ourselves, that have we really worked in a right-based approach? Have we really figured out who is not in the room? And have we really made strategies to the people who are not in the room? So I would say that this conversation has to come within us, and this conversation will definitely pave a path towards the global advocacy at the UN and to different stakeholders at the global level. And we believe that this can only be possible when we are collective. This can only be possible when we can understand the voices of the voiceless people, when we can understand what human right-based approach mean and what does it mean to the most vulnerable group. So if we do not have those kind of approaches and strategies, I would say that this World Conference will not be achievable, and it will not amplify the voices of women with disabilities, who are 28 million all around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pratimaji. Of course, despite having such a big population, Indigenous women with disabilities are still far, far behind the whether you talk about development processes or exercising their fundamental rights, even the basic rights, they are not being able to. And of course, I think very important point, if we are collective, I think a lot of things are possible, but if not, then the challenges are still there. And internalizing the issues of women with disabilities is very, very important, because most of the time we hear Pratimaji of sometimes sharing her frustration also only when she's there, then the Indigenous women with disabilities issues are raised. Otherwise, why not like each of us raise the issue and voices of Indigenous women with disability and advocate for mainstreaming the voices, whether it's at the local level, national level, regional or global level. So thank you, Pratimaji. That's wonderful sharing. Maybe I think we have a little bit of time since one of the speaker did not join. So maybe I'll just go quickly to Nanaya. Just one more question if you could respond. This session is also joined by different young women leader across the globe, so who are aspiring to be a leader, who are also trying to learn from the leaders like you. So what would you suggest, or like what would the key message that you would like to give to the younger generation, especially to the young Indigenous women leaders who want to be who are in the process of becoming a leader? So maybe if you could just quickly share. Sorry, it looks like she has left the session. So I think we don't have any more speakers. So maybe Pratimaji, before we close, if you want to say something, you have already shared, I think, your challenges and also some of the achievements that through your movement, your collective effort. But if you would like to say something before we close.
Thank you, Chandraji. I would say that this Second World Conference on Indigenous Women will be a benchmark for setting the agenda that Indigenous women are pioneer for inclusion, for diversity, and the pathway for implementing the human rights values for not only Indigenous women, but for all women. So on behalf of the Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network, I would say that the World Conference outcome document will be an example, setting an example to rest of the world. And in that regard, I would say that Indigenous women's identities are very crucial, fundamental, and diversity. Today, we are not only Indigenous women, today we are Indigenous young girls, youth, women with disabilities, elderly people, LGBTIQ communities, and other communities. And if we are not able to respect and promote the rights of every individuals, of all our sisters, we will not be able to achieve our collective goals. So for us, it is our time to have and to share our collective pains, sufferings, and also the achievements that we can collectively bring. Because the data shows that the national data of Nepal shows that 85% Indigenous women's, girls, and women with disabilities have faced some forms of violence and discriminations in their lives. And if you look at this data is really terrific for us. So for me, I would say that the ground realities has to be framed from the global initiatives. And for us, it is time to have these global initiatives collectively to ensure these ground challenges and to address the diversity of indigenous women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pratima ji. So just to sum up, that when we hear the voices from Asia, Pacific, Arctic sisters from these three regions, then we find a lot of similarities in terms of the challenges that they are facing. We have been facing the burnt of colonization since centuries long, and the different layer of violence because of our identity as indigenous women, our identity as indigenous women with disability. So we have been facing like multiple layer of discrimination within our communities and by the mainstream societies as well. So while saying that, we can also see we have come so far in terms of our achievement when we hear the experience of Sami women despite the challenges they are facing. So they have also reached out to that level where they are claiming their position as leaders of the community, their own communities, as presidents or in the parliament. So these kind of achievements, and at the same time, Pratima ji has very specifically mentioned about how their movement has become able to maybe not fully, but I think we are on the way to that like process, that bringing that voices from the local to the global at the international mechanism, international forum. So they have been very successful doing those kind of things. But I think very important part, I think all the three speakers have mentioned is that I think the collectiveness. I think building alliances, whether within our communities, within the allies, within the indigenous women group across the world, like this kind of platform, I think it really helps to build the solidarity, support, and then I think it's a lot of thing is also a lot of time. It also matters like if you have that solidarity and support from the other sisters from the other regions. So I think that kind of platform has already been created, and hopefully we believe that no one will leave behind, especially we as indigenous women with disability, who are the most marginalized groups within the marginalized groups, will be in the forefront in the leadership positions. And I think this forum itself is an example of the inclusivity, the representation. I know FEME has been trying to have the representative participation of all the region, all the group, all the intersectional groups, and the voices should be coming from the ground. So of course the political declaration, the global agenda that we all are collectively like working on, like developing it, will definitely be inclusive, and then more bringing the issues, voices, and then that will lead some path for us for the coming years, like how we shape our agenda and then issues in the coming days. So with that saying, I'd like to I think we have to close the session now. Thank you so much for everyone virtually, and then those who have joined through the platform and also through this webinar session. I'd like to thank you again, and wish you all a very good day, and then good night. I think some parts of the world it will be good night. And thank you, FEME team, once again for this initiative. Thank you. And I think it's over to you, Sushila ji. You are moderating. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandaji. With this, I thank you, our distinguished speakers, taking through your journey and roots of it. It has enabled the global indigenous women's movement, breaking the barriers and making more inclusive and intersectional, ensuring no one is left behind, and proving together we are stronger and transforming our realities gradually. It really inspired us and our future in generation. And Second One Conference and our declaration is our roadmap for action to achieve our collective rights further. Thank you, Chandaji, for creating amicable sharing environment through your moderation. This conference is live streamed in social media. Many of our sisters, brothers, and our partners and allies are watching us and sending greetings to all of us here. So thank you, all of you, for joining us through social media. With this, Now we will listen a beautiful indigenous music by Chirpal. We present Silva Falcon in Kancha Temple. This is a ritual dance of Costco, a love song, and an invocation to the spirit of the woods and supernatural beings, protectors of the rain. Thank you, technical team, for the music.
Gracias, Sushila. Gracias, Chanda, y a todas las hermanas que han participado en esta primera parte. Pratima, a nuestra hermana Vicky Tauli y a cada una por sus palabras. Bueno, pasamos entonces ahora a conocer un poco la metodología, la agenda, qué es lo que viene en las próximas semanas. Entonces voy a pedir a el equipo que me ayude con la presentación. Los slides están en inglés, pero mi intervención la voy a hacer en español, agradeciendo aquí el apoyo de las hermanos de traductores. La siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Bien, quiero empezar por compartirles el lema, el eslogan de la conferencia, Juntas por el Bienestar y la Madre Tierra. Acá en las intervenciones se comentó la gran preocupación que tenemos sobre las distintas situaciones de violencia que impactan la vida de las mujeres indígenas. Y cuando nos reunimos con las hermanas Samis haciendo la preparatoria para la conferencia que se iba a realizar en territorio Sami, también se coincidía que una de las preocupaciones es justamente la situación de la violencia que rompe la armonía, el bienestar o el buen vivir de las personas, los pueblos, pero también de la madre tierra. Y es ahí que nace este lema que nos va a acompañar a lo largo de la conferencia y que esperamos que sea nuestra guía también para enfocarnos en esos mensajes y en esa agenda global hacia el bienestar, la madre tierra, basándonos en nuestros derechos individuales y colectivos. La siguiente diapositiva. En esta presentación breve que voy a hacer, compartiré algo sobre los objetivos de la conferencia, cómo la conferencia nos ha generado y fortalecido nuestros movimientos. Las mujeres indígenas estamos en movimiento alrededor de la conferencia, la metodología que vamos a tener, los espacios de participación, la agenda general, sé que muchas pues no han podido accesar a la agenda, pero también cómo vamos a transitar en esta casa virtual, en este espacio virtual que hoy nos permite encontrarnos. En la siguiente diapositiva. Quiero, antes de continuar presentando los objetivos, pedir una disculpa a todas las hermanas, hermanos aliadas y aliados que en la mañana tuvieron unas mayores dificultades para conectarse a la plataforma. Tuvimos ahí una pequeña crisis tecnológica que estamos todavía resolviendo y esperamos ya normalizarlo en los próximos días. Así que una disculpa por esto y sé que algunos todavía no han podido ingresar y nos están siguiendo por el Facebook o por el YouTube. Bien, los objetivos que nos hace reunirnos en esta ocasión está enfocado hasta fortalecer el movimiento de mujeres indígenas. Y cuando hablamos del movimiento no estamos hablando de algo abstracto, sino de todas las organizaciones, desde lo local a lo global, las redes, las distintas expresiones, alianzas con otros movimientos. Esperamos también consensuar una agenda global que refleje las prioridades y el reconocimiento e implementación de nuestros derechos colectivos e individuales para los próximos años. En esta conferencia nos ha permitido también identificar las necesidades de las organizaciones y que desde estas necesidades también podamos complementarnos y desde FIMI asumir también un rol de acompañamiento y en el fortalecimiento de las organizaciones. Pues como les decía, en la siguiente diapositiva, en las siguientes vamos a ver cómo las regiones hemos estado en movimiento, no solo hoy que da inicio a la conferencia, sino desde muchos años, como lo decía nuestra hermana Vicky, aquí retomo sus palabras, esto no empieza hoy, ni en el 2013, ni en el 2000, esto ha empezado muchas décadas atrás y las mujeres indígenas hemos estado en movimiento desde las distintas regiones. Llegar hoy a esta conferencia ha implicado otras etapas, otros momentos, otros procesos y otras condiciones. Y todas somos complementarias, todas somos una continuidad, y así es como esta conferencia ha venido a fortalecer ese movimiento que estamos teniendo a nivel de las regiones. En la siguiente diapositiva vamos a poder ver cómo nos preparamos para llegar a este día o a estos días de conferencia que vamos a tener. Preparamos preconferencias o reuniones preparatorias presenciales en Asia, en Nepal en el 2019. Igualmente en diciembre de 2019 estuvimos en la preparatoria con las hermanas de África, en Camerún. En las Américas también se hizo una reunión preparatoria en México en febrero 2020. Fue la última actividad presencial que pudimos tener y bueno, llegó la pandemia. Sin embargo, pues la pandemia no nos ha detenido, hemos continuado de manera virtual en el transcurso de este año, en 2021, en el marco de la conferencia, pensando en prepararnos. Han habido reuniones virtuales desde Asia, las compañeras de África, el Pacífico, como lo decía nuestra hermana Sandra, que para nosotros es muy importante porque son regiones en las que todavía falta fortalecer ese movimiento y las redes, y desde FIMI pues también estamos con esa prioridad para el Pacífico y el Ártico, igual las Américas. Y me da muchísimo gusto comentarles y ver fotografías de compañeras que en este momento también están reunidas, por ejemplo, en Nepal, para poder ser parte de la conferencia. Otras compañeras están transmitiendo por radios comunitarias. Es decir, estamos en movimiento. La conferencia solo es como el vehículo que nos está ayudando a empujar este movimiento y unificar nuestras voces como mujeres indígenas. Voy a mostrarles algunas fotografías de estos encuentros en las siguientes diapositivas. Aquí estábamos en Nepal. Un recuerdo y un saludo a todas las hermanas de Asia que estuvieron. En la siguiente fotografía vemos a las compañeras de África con todas las subregiones, también preparando la declaración regional para la conferencia. Luego nos fuimos a las Américas, muy concurrida, por cierto, muchísimas compañeras encontrándose. Igual un saludo a todas las hermanas que estuvieron en este encuentro preparatorio. Virtuales tuvimos, mencionaba la del Pacífico, que vemos aquí en la siguiente fotografía, las compañeras reunidas en el Pacífico desde el espacio virtual. Bien, ahora vamos a hablar un poco sobre hacia dónde nos lleva todo este movimiento, y en la siguiente diapositiva encontraremos que nos encaminamos a preparar la declaración política y la agenda global. Estos encuentros, estas reuniones nos han dado muchísimos insumos para construir nuestra declaración y lo que llamamos la agenda global o el documento político que nos va a guiar los próximos años para nuestra incidencia ante los gobiernos a nivel nacional, internacional, ante organismos bilaterales, donantes. Hemos tomado en cuenta las distintas declaraciones, posicionamientos, documentos que se han producido en los últimos años. Como ustedes bien sabrán, hay distintos mecanismos y siempre las mujeres han estado ahí presentando su voz. Entonces, desde FIMI hemos conformado un comité junto con las redes regionales, y están las compañeras sistematizando todo lo que se puede recoger de los informes, por ejemplo, que se prepararon en el marco de BI+25. Cada región preparó un informe de balance Todo esto está siendo la base para construir el documento cero. El documento cero casi está finalizado. Esto lo vamos a socializar, vamos a retroalimentarlo con los resultados y lo que nos proporcionen las sesiones interactivas, los grupos de trabajo que tendremos durante estos 4 días. Y el último día de la conferencia se llevará a cabo la adopción de nuestros documentos políticos. Por supuesto, este documento está siendo revisado, construido con las redes regionales de las cuales la mayoría de ustedes son parte. Seguimos con la otra diapositiva y ahora voy a compartirles un poco más acerca de la metodología de los próximos 4 días. Como sabrán, nos vamos a reunir una vez por semana. La próxima semana tendremos la otra reunión. Estamos reuniéndonos en la mañana para las Américas, Europa, tarde para África y en las mañanas de Asia, el Pacífico y noche para las Américas. Pero la idea es que tengamos 2 horarios en donde podamos participar acorde a los tiempos de nuestra región. Vamos a transitar o a caminar por 4 enfoques. El primero, que es hoy, ¿cuál es este camino recorrido? Los caminos que hemos andado, cuáles son nuestros aportes, nuestras realidades. Esto es lo que vamos a abordar hoy en las sesiones interactivas y que también en la mañana, aún con algunas dificultades tecnológicas, tuvimos algunas sesiones y estamos analizando, poniendo sobre la mesa los caminos andados. El segundo día nos iremos hacia ese marco internacional, los mecanismos que se ha logrado a lo largo de los años con mucha incidencia desde los pueblos indígenas y los movimientos. Nada sobre nosotras sin nosotras, un análisis de los instrumentos, cómo estamos nosotras contribuyendo en esta implementación de estos instrumentos. El día 3 haremos una parada para mirar hacia adentro y reconocernos, reconocer nuestras diversidades, reconocer nuestros desafíos como movimiento, como organizaciones, como redes, cómo fortalecemos nuestras alianzas, nuestras articulaciones. A eso nos dedicaremos, al diálogo intergeneracional, a la interseccionalidad que nos compartía Prátima y también lo dijo Olga en la mañana, y salir con algunas estrategias para nuestro fortalecimiento en los próximos años como movimientos. Y el último día estaremos dedicadas a la consenso de nuestra agenda global y la declaración política, para lo cual pues estamos invitando a autoridades, delegados de gobiernos, de las agencias de las Naciones Unidas y donantes y otros espacios a que nos acompañen el último día para recibir nuestro documento político. Ese es como el enfoque general por el cual vamos a transitar, los espacios de participación que tendremos, las plenarias, las sesiones interactivas o paralelas, los grupos de trabajo, tendremos espacio de sanación y de espiritualidad, un mural de las defensoras y activistas donde necesitamos que estemos enviando toda la información posible, cuidando también la seguridad de las personas. Expresiones artísticas tendremos a lo largo del desarrollo de la conferencia, la Feria del Conocimiento y bueno, nuestro evento de cierre. Son como los principales espacios y momentos de participación que tendremos todas. Nuestra agenda general tiene 2 partes, como ustedes vieron el día de hoy. Tenemos una primera parte que es la plenaria, donde estamos todas Y todos en esta plenaria tenemos nuestra invocación, el conversatorio o panel, un poco de arte, mensajes. Después de este tiempo, de hecho, después de mi presentación, tendremos un espacio de receso, de descanso para las participantes y que es a la vez un espacio de transición porque todo el equipo, traductores, etcétera, nos trasladamos a preparar la sala para recibirlas a ustedes después en las sesiones interactivas. El segundo momento van a ser las sesiones de paralelas. Hoy tendremos 9 sesiones. El próximo día tendremos 6 y así hay distintas sesiones para cada día. Esa es la segunda parte. No volvemos a la plenaria, terminamos allí con las sesiones interactivas y nos vemos en la siguiente sesión, nos actualizamos y continuamos. Esa es la forma en que vamos a trabajar. Como les decía, tenemos 2 horarios según convenga a cada uno. El primer día, que es el día de hoy, pues ya hemos realizado casi la primera parte. Después tendremos el receso y cada quien puede ir a buscar su sesión interactiva. Estas sesiones no son organizadas por FIMI. Esto es importante valorarlo y agradecer a toda su participación porque todos estos temas están siendo asumidas por organizaciones que tienen la experiencia, que tienen el conocimiento y van a asumir cada una de estas sesiones. Es decir, que nuestra conferencia es participativa. Aquí vamos a llevar a la mesa nuestras buenas prácticas, nuestras lecciones, nuestros desafíos desde distintas voces, desde lo local a lo global. El día 19 de agosto, bueno, para las Américas 19 y para Asia y Pacífico sería 20, que es el día 2 de nuestro evento. Igual tendremos la primera parte en plenaria, donde todos podemos estar. De hecho, se transmite también por las redes sociales. Y el panel de este segundo día está enfocado a analizar los instrumentos internacionales, de lo local a la agenda global, el rol de las mujeres indígenas en la implementación de estos instrumentos. Y después de ello, tendremos la transición, nos preparamos para ir a las sesiones interactivas. Tendremos 5 sesiones interactivas, una dedicada a la declaración y el plan de acción de Beijing, a los ODS, la tercera sobre la declaración y los documentos relacionados a la Conferencia Global de Pueblos Indígenas, cuarta sesión, el convenio sobre cambio climático y todo lo relacionado a la diversidad, a la biodiversidad. Y la quinta sesión vamos a trabajar sobre CEDAW y ahí estamos invitando también al comité de la CEDAW para que pueda estar con nosotras y analizar la recomendación general para las mujeres indígenas y las niñas ante el comité de la CEDAW. Pasado el segundo día, nos vamos a la tercera semana. En esta tercera semana igual tendremos la primera jornada en plenaria. El panel de este día estará dedicado al diálogo intergeneracional, muy importante para nosotros, para nuestro movimiento, y tendremos nuevamente nuestro receso y transición, y después de ello acá no vamos a tener sesiones interactivas, sino grupos de trabajo. ¿Qué significa? Que no vamos a tener panelistas, no vamos a desarrollar todo un tema, sino vamos a tener un tiempo más de diálogo, de discusión, de aporte, de reflexión en temas como nuestros derechos individuales, en el diálogo intergeneracional, el establecimiento de alianzas y de la reciprocidad. Vamos a conversar sobre la filantropía, igualmente sobre feminismos, nuestras identidades, que tanto se ha hablado, ¿no? Aquí todas somos diversas, pero tenemos una base común también como pueblos indígenas. Y la interseccionalidad, vamos a tener una mesa dedicada específicamente a conversar sobre estos desafíos que se enfrenta como mujeres indígenas, niñas, jóvenes con discapacidad. Y finalmente llegamos al día 2, que es nuestro 2 de septiembre, que es el último día de esta jornada. Acá pues dedicaremos a la parte artística, tendremos un diálogo de alto nivel, juntas por el buen vivir y por la madre tierra. En este diálogo pues estamos preparando ya todas las invitaciones para que nos acompañen autoridades y líderes. Y bueno, tendremos la presentación y la adopción de nuestra declaración y agenda global. Un evento cultural que esperamos no solo sea pregrabado, sino que tengamos actividades desde los territorios para poder celebrar y cerrar, conmemorando la vida, conmemorando el trabajo de cuántas mujeres nos han antecedido, hombres que han dado su vida, su trabajo, pues también tenemos que estar agradecidas y celebrar la vida aún con todos los retos que significa para los pueblos indígenas y las mujeres. Bien, en relación a cómo transitaremos por lo virtual, que en este momento pues es todo un reto para todas. No es fácil, lo sabemos, ha sido un reto para FIMI transitar por toda la parte tecnológica y virtual, pero en el intranet, que es lo que vamos a tratar de que todas las personas que se registraron tengan acceso a la intranet o a la plataforma, y ahí encontraremos las plenarias, las sesiones interactivas, los grupos de trabajos, la feria de conocimiento, el mural de las defensoras que les comentaba. También ahí podemos encontrar el contacto para sugerencias y necesidades de apoyo. Esto vamos a encontrar en este espacio virtual donde a cualquier hora, si desean entrar. Algo importante que vamos a hacer es que estamos grabando las sesiones para quienes no pudieron estar, después puedan ingresar a la plataforma y puedan accesar. El día de hoy es muy probable que algunas compañeras y personas observadores han tenido problema para accesar. Sin embargo, en los próximos días ya vamos a restablecer para que todas puedan ir ingresando. Así que les pedimos su paciencia, comprensión en estos aspectos tecnológicos. Bueno, ¿cómo vamos a ir hoy a las sesiones interactivas después de esta plenaria? Pueden ir seleccionando en la plataforma las sesiones. Para ello, después del receso que vamos a tener, les anunciaremos para retirarse de esta sala general y tienen que ir a buscar en el intranet o en plataforma en donde está la sesión, le dan clic y ya ustedes se van a la sesión en donde van a participar. Las personas que van a ser organizadoras o panelistas de estas sesiones han recibido un enlace directo a sus correos para ingresar inmediatamente después de que terminemos y puedan estar media hora antes, o sea que el espacio de receso en las organizaciones no la van a tener, sino que se van a su sala a prepararse y esperar a los participantes. Esto es lo que tenemos para ustedes de información muy general. Por favor, tengan la confianza de escribirnos, preguntar, y estamos haciendo el máximo de nuestro esfuerzo de responder a quienes que no les llegó el link, que no pueden accesar, que no está bien un dato, etcétera. sepan que detrás de estas pantallas sabemos un gran equipo tratando de acompañarles, de hacer de que esta conferencia sea el espacio de todas y de todos. Acá lo dejo, mi presentación, agradeciéndoles de nuevo por estar y unas disculpas con las personas que están en vía Facebook, vía YouTube, porque a las sesiones interactivas pues ya no tendremos transmisión general. Algunas sí las van a transmitir las organizaciones, otras no va a ser posible, así que quienes pueden accesar a la plataforma será la única forma de ir a las sesiones interactivas. Muchísimas gracias y dejo la palabra a Mina.
Thank you so much, Tere, for giving us a detailed explanation on the conference agenda and the methodology. I am sure many people here today will leave with a good knowledge and understanding of how the conference will run through for the next weeks. Thank you again, Tere. On this note, it's my pleasure to announce a break for everyone, but that doesn't mean that you should close your computers or close the session. We are not yet done. It's just a very short break where you will all grab a cup of coffee or a bottle of water. And then we have prepared for you a very beautiful videos that you'll be able to see. We have 2 videos for this session. We have one that is prepared by IWO, the African Indigenous Women Organization. It's showing the different cultural diversity in Africa. And then the second video, you'll be able to see the journey, the experience of the Global Leadership School participants and how they participated with the UN Forum in 2019. So I will invite you, the technical team, go ahead with the first video and everyone can go ahead and get water or some coffee.
Históricamente ustedes saben que las mujeres indígenas nunca hemos estado pasivas. La historia nos cuenta que han habido muchas luchas post-colonia para la liberación en el que muchas mujeres de diferentes pueblos han tenido un rol protagónico. Ha sido una inspiración, ¿no? Tanto el movimiento de pueblos indígenas como el movimiento de mujeres para poder pensar un poco más acerca de nuestro rol como mujeres dentro del movimiento, pero también las reivindicaciones que deberíamos perseguir como mujeres indígenas.
Me parece que las mujeres indígenas hemos avanzado en conocer nuestros derechos y hay bastante liderazgo, pero necesitamos fortalecer capacidades especializadas para poder estar en espacios de debate y poder fundamentar desde los conocimientos ancestrales nuestra participación, nuestra incidencia, nuestras propuestas.
Las y los jóvenes indígenas nos vemos forzados a migrar a las ciudades, cada vez más a temprana edad, ante el avance del despojo de nuestros territorios, la ausencia de servicios de salud, educación y la falta de oportunidades para nuestro desarrollo económico. Así experimentamos la pérdida de la identidad y la relación armoniosa con nuestros territorios.
Indigenous peoples in this world, we are all down for the fight for our land. We are, you know, we're high in incarcerations in our prisons. We have a lot of issues. We have a lot of violations that are happening to us.
El primer derecho colectivo que reivindicamos también las mujeres indígenas es el derecho al territorio, a la tierra, a los recursos naturales, y ahora en el contexto de la Agenda 2030 es lo mismo. No podemos pensar en desarrollo si no tenemos garantizados nuestros derechos territoriales. Esa relación espiritual que tenemos con las montañas, con el río, con el agua, con el sol, y seguir alimentando la vida física, espiritual, pero también seguir alimentando la posibilidad de la continuidad cultural, porque ¿a dónde van a ir nuestros hijos? Ya no van a tener ni tienen la misma conexión con toda esta filosofía y esta forma de vida y concepción de la vida en otro lugar donde son excluidos, son víctimas de racismo, de maltratos por ser indígenas.
Es bien difícil en la ciudad, la vida en la ciudad, lo poco que vivimos, el tema económico, el transporte, la alimentación también no es lo mismo. O sea, porque yo crecí en el campo, digamos, en la comunidad, y en la ciudad y es otra movida, ¿no?
Entonces preparamos una primera propuesta que se llama Mujeres Indígenas frente al Nuevo Milenio, en el que soñamos en cómo seríamos si nos constituimos en una red o un mecanismo global, donde se puedan sumar todas las aspiraciones, pero al mismo tiempo podamos confluir en prioridades comunes. Entonces, en el Beijing +5, que fue el 2000 en Nueva York, fue la primera vez que llegamos mujeres indígenas aquí a Nueva York, a la reunión de la Comisión de Estatus de la Mujer. Logramos una primera recomendación y ahí nace justamente FIMI. Actualmente ya FIMI tiene más de 15 años. Hemos hecho reuniones regionales, como FIMI articulado con las redes regionales para traer recomendaciones específicas como mujeres indígenas. Y entonces vamos también globalizando nuestras prioridades y también tratando de tener estrategias comunes para lograr el respeto a nuestros derechos, como indígenas y como mujeres.
Tenemos 4 programas principales: el programa de incidencia y participación política, el programa de formación que incluye la Escuela Global de Liderazgo y nuestro programa sobre el abordaje de la violencia contra las mujeres indígenas y temas de investigación de impacto. Y por último, el Fondo de Mujeres Indígenas AINI, que es como el brazo económico de FIMI, a través del cual nosotras acompañamos procesos de las mujeres indígenas. Estos 4 programas se articulan entre sí. La visión es que no puede haber un empoderamiento económico sin desarrollo de capacidades, y para eso necesitamos nuestra escuela global.
Mi nombre es Indira Vargas, yo soy de Ecuador. Yo soy indígena amazónica quichua, vengo de la Amazonía. Ecuador está en Sudamérica, casi por acá. Está en este país súper chiquito, verdecito, verde. Soy de aquí de la Amazonía, de Ecuador, justamente ahí. Y muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias, Indira.
Me gané una beca con ONU Mujeres, pero con el apoyo de FIMI. Ahí conté igual mi experiencia, ahí es donde yo pongo la demanda igual sobre la visibilización de las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad, que es un tema que se tiene que discutir, que se tiene que trabajar. Conté mi experiencia de la vivencia comunitaria, los conflictos. En ese mismo mes me mandan como una carta igual a decirle que si es que podía postular para esto de la escuela global. Y ahora estoy aquí, ¿no? Participando en la escuela. He podido como incidir, poder compartir igual las experiencias, conocer también, ¿no? Ampliar todo ese conocimiento con todos los procesos de otras organizaciones del otro lado del continente. Kai Ponjaibi, Nyukanchita, Ashka Samaita, Napashu, Tukuiguna, Kai Warmiguna, Shamushkauna, Shu Wangoya Wamburingao, Edir, Kandatapuni, Nyukanchi, Samaita, Nyukanchita, Upaichu. Agradecer a la Gran Madre Tierra, agradecer a la Madre Agua, agradecer al Padre y Abuelo Fuego, quienes nos acompañan en este día.
My name's Sandra Creamer. I am a one-year Kalkadoon. I'm from Mount Isa. I was born in Mount Isa, and Mount Isa is northwest Queensland in Australia. 5 years ago, they had the FEMI school. Started the FEMI school, and then they asked me if I would like to be a participant at the school, and I thought, wow, you know, and I just finished my law degree, and I thought, yeah, why not?
Sandra nos ha acompañado en la facilitación, pero además Sandra es de la directiva de FEMI.
And it was through the FEMI program and the school that I am where I am today in my life, because 4 years ago, it changed me. It gave me a new direction in what I want to do. And I'm actually a lawyer. I came from a criminal background, worked in victims of crime and murder cases for Indigenous women specifically, and homicide victims. I still work in homicide victims for Indigenous women, but it gave me more of a platform to be able to work on land rights, native title I work on, and it also gave me an understanding a lot more of the international law.
The school was the online training. You do a lot of reading, and you have to answer questions. It makes you think outside. The questions connected you back to what your issues are in your community, so it really made you think a lot more. And it really made you, if you want to research, they had a lot of documents. And then so we came to the school, and at the school, the Columbia University, it's everybody's dream to walk into Columbia University and to even spend 2 or 3 days there to be taught by Columbia University professors. You know, that was excellent. And the other thing it did is that we had to do an advocacy plan. That advocacy plan is something that you dream of yourself. What you think that you want to do to empower yourself, to empower women or men in your community or your community or your region. They allow you to dream your dream in that school. So you can put your advocacy plan together. Mine was doing a legal information kit, which I'm actually doing now in my workplace.
I felt that Indigenous peoples were not able to, didn't know how to video record and needed to have strength when they're giving evidence and advocacy in our works for what we do today. Because as we know, a video cam recorder can really be the foundation for us when we need any sort of facts against any of our violations of human rights.
Podríamos decir que uno de los ejemplos de cómo se da esto en la práctica es cuando una mujer indígena, joven, mayor, que llega a través de nuestra Escuela Global de Liderazgo, ella tiene la oportunidad posteriormente de aplicar a los fondos de AINI y a su vez pues participan en procesos de incidencia. Es importante para nosotras que conozcan cómo trabajamos la coordinación de articulación y nos gustaría también tener sus sugerencias, sus comentarios.
I came through the Pacific Caucus. We've been here for years, and I met FEMI, and then I became a participant on here, and then on the board. So FEMI has opened the door up now to a lot of women's organisations in the Pacific. So we brought women from Guam last year, from Micronesia and Vanuatu the year before, Papua New Guinea. So they're all different little countries in the Pacific, 300 islands in the Pacific. So FEMI has been able, through my support and putting it out through the Pacific caucuses and women's groups in the Pacific, we've been able to reach out to isolated little areas like in Vanuatu in particular, and bring women through the FEMI.
The Global Leadership School had really helped me understand more the United Nations process and how we can use the United Nations as Indigenous people to talk about our issues and offer recommendations as to what we can change. I feel like the Leadership School was very beneficial for me in that way in terms of understanding the process of the United Nations.
También como escuela estamos participando en el foro permanente, que igual es una parte de la incidencia, conocer los tratados internacionales para poder recomendar o para poder cambiar ciertas cosas que no están funcionando también, ¿no?
We are very humbled to have a few minutes with you, and so we'll move very fast with the discussions. We deliberated a few things, and we got one person to present them to you, so that will save time.
So over the course of the last week, students from the FEMI Global Leadership School have identified key issues that affect our Indigenous communities across the regions, varying from displacement of Indigenous peoples from their homelands to continued environmental violence due to extractive industries.
It's good to see young people, doing and understanding and being inspired to do much more for your own communities. the women, and of course the children and elders in your communities. Whatever you learned from this course should be used, you know, because that's the point of having this course, so that you will be able to have a better understanding of the tools that you can use to empower yourselves as well as your own communities. And that's certainly the objective of this global school. So I would like to hear more later from any of you about what you are doing. Good luck and all the best. Okay.
My advocacy plan was simply to work with different stakeholders from the community level, going up to the politicians who are lobbying and advocacy, so that we draft a bill and pass an act of parliament that will finally give recognition to the indigenous people of Kenya.
The FEME training was, for me, just a real unique opportunity to connect. It was 21 women from 16 countries around the world coming together with our traditions, with our stories, with leadership experience in our communities, different advocacy styles. And we were able to come together and find out that really we are facing the same issues. So we get to network together, we get to build capacity with one another, but most importantly, we get to come in to this United Nations Permanent Forum session together, strong and with a collective voice.
With this experience, I was able to reconcile theory and practice. I've heard their stories, different stories, human rights advocates of the world, and if I'll go back home, I will teach this to my students. I'm a teacher in the university, teaching indigenous knowledge and gender issues.
Las mujeres defensoras de los derechos colectivos de nuestros pueblos nos vemos sujetas a amenazas constantes contra nuestras vidas. Informes de organizaciones de derechos humanos dan cuenta de los crecientes niveles de violencia, incluyendo agresiones físicas, acoso, criminalización, asesinatos, feminicidios y otras de violencia contra nosotras.
Han pasado tantos años que ahora ya podemos decir que las mujeres indígenas defendemos los derechos colectivos en tanto pertenecientes a pueblos, con todo lo que ello implica, y los derechos individuales como mujeres. Entonces, cuando hablamos, por ejemplo, de luchar contra la violencia, luchamos contra las violencias, la violencia doméstica y la violencia institucional o estructural que viene desde afuera, como pueblos indígenas.
Consideramos que FEME es una puerta o una ventana por donde podemos entrar, transitar varias mujeres indígenas para articularnos hacia otros procesos, hacia otros aliados y aliadas.
Tenemos que seguir haciendo esfuerzos para que las mujeres y los hombres, las niñas y las jóvenes de la nueva generación se apropien de este proceso y que ellas también tengan un rol de ser generadoras de nuevos procesos, que incorpore a las organizaciones de base, a las organizaciones nacionales y con mejores capacidades desarrolladas puedan incidir en la política nacional, porque eso es lo que se espera. Ahora las jóvenes tienen nuevas oportunidades que hemos abierto en los últimos 30 años como mujeres indígenas.
And it's about empowering us. It's about taking us out of poverty. It's about helping us grow our communities, making our children strong, making our partners strong, and making the world stronger for us. And to be recognised that we are Indigenous women, because when I was born under the Fauna and Flora Act. I wasn't even considered a human being. But you know what? I'm an Indigenous woman. The world can see that. And same along with all my sisters. We're Indigenous women, you know. We all have our tribal where we come from. I'm Wanani Kalkadoon, first and foremost.
Yo pienso que todo esto es bien importante conocer, hacer conocer a nuestra comunidad, a nuestras organizaciones que se tienen que empoderar de esto, que de ganas no están escritos y si es que no está funcionando hay que ver qué otras medidas hay que tomar. Y así ha sido como mi participación, ¿no? El estar aquí en ese territorio de Nueva York, conocer esta realidad, conocer este terreno, este territorio que es potencia mundial también, ¿no? Y ha sido una experiencia, ¿no? Una experiencia para mí. Estoy admirada de mí misma, de estar aquí. Pienso que por algo es. Entonces espero aportar algo para los jóvenes, para los jóvenes indígenas, para las mujeres indígenas, o sea, para todos. Entonces me lo llevo esta experiencia también.